This is City Focus, the podcast from the League of Oregon Cities, where we explore the issues that matter to cities across Oregon.
Welcome to episode 12 of City Focus. On this episode, I'm joined in studio by LOC Board of Directors President Greg Evans. Greg and I talk about his goals for the upcoming year, his many years of distinguished public service, and the unique perspective he brings to his role as LOC Board President, as well as his election to the National League of Cities Board of Directors. Greg, welcome to City Focus.
Thank you, Denise.
I don't know if all of our listeners are familiar with you. You've been on the League Board for how long now?
3.5 years.
Okay, so a lot of the board members, you're well known within the league community. For those who aren't maybe as familiar with you, can you just in a nutshell tell us what it is? What's your elected role for being on the League of Oregon Cities board?
Well, I'm elected to City Council in Eugene. Mm-hmm. I was appointed in 2013 as a replacement for a city councilor who moved over to the county side of things. And I had been on the boards of Lane Transit District, the Lane County Fair Board, and a number of other activities and things over the years that I've lived in Eugene and in the state of Oregon. And so it was kind of a natural progression for me to apply for the position. I was appointed by a 7-0 vote of the council. Mm-hmm. And then I subsequently won election to the unexpired term in 2013, elected to a full term in 2014, and elected to my second full term on the council in 2018.
Okay, so obviously a long history of public service in your neck of the woods.
Yes.
Very nice. Well, I know at the recent League of Oregon Cities, our annual conference in September down in Eugene, it was announced that you were appointed to kind of a big role at a national level. Can you talk a little bit about that? What your role is on the NLC board?
Yeah. Recently, I was appointed to serve on the National League of Cities Board of Directors for a 2-year term. I had served previously in a 1-year role when I was chairman of the National League of Cities Transportation and Infrastructure Services Committee. Okay. And then I decided to apply for the full board and for a full term, and I was lucky to have been appointed. And then I'm also involved in another role with the National League of Cities. Is I've been appointed to a housing task force, an 18-member housing task force of local elected officials across the country to deal with issues of housing and homelessness.
So that 18 members, so you're representing the state of Oregon in that. What does that look like? That seems like it's certainly a feather in your cap and a nod of approval for what you're doing. What does that look like for Oregon as far as you representing Oregon?
I think that my position on the task force is going to be to articulate many of the issues that we have on the local level and the state level at a national level. I think that we have issues that are informing us on lack of housing supply, homelessness, lack of quality housing supply. We have missing middle housing all across the country, and we are really struggling with affordable housing. And so our goal is to shape policy, federal policy, in a direction that is going to help alleviate some of the issues that we're facing on the local level, where we don't have funding and we don't have the resources necessary to make sure that all of our citizens are adequately and appropriately housed.
Okay, so that gets us a seat at the table, so to speak, at the national level. To kind of loop back around now to Oregon, now you're incoming president of the League of Oregon Cities Board. So that's an entire year commitment for you to shape kind of the items. Is there priorities that you have coming in starting in 2019 as the new league board? Can you articulate what your main priorities are when you take that role over?
I like to try to focus on my sweet spots.
Okay.
And I've been a transportation policy advocate for a number of years. I spent 7 years on the board of directors of Lane Transit District, was heavily involved in the implementation of the bus rapid transit project in Eugene, both in the Gateway area and the West Eugene areas. I also am going to focus very heavily on housing, as I already alluded to. Housing and homelessness are two critical issues that we continue to wrestle with at the local and state level. And then the other piece is workforce development through career and technical education programs. As you probably know, I am an associate vice president at Lane Community College, and workforce development is at the top of our list. And so by combining some of the priorities of the League of Oregon Cities with priorities across the state, we can effectively address some of the issues that are affecting all of us, no matter what areas that we have in terms of our individual focus.
Can you expound a little bit more on the education piece of that? Because obviously you come from an education background, how you see that as being critical and very linked in the process.
We have issues in the state around workforce development. Yeah. We do not have enough of our young people that are going into career and technical educations where they can finish a program at the high school level, then transition to an additional program at the community college level, coming out with an associate degree or a certificate that they can take directly into the workforce. We have a disconnect right now between what the private sector and the public sector are saying to us in terms of what they need in terms of workforce development and our ability to get those young people and those human resources to those jobs and in those jobs. And so I think that the League of Oregon Cities has a critical role in working with the Oregon Community College Association, working with the associations representing our K-12 partners, and with our universities to be able to present a united front to the legislature and the governor about the critical needs that we have to fund career and technical education and to fully fund the Measure 98 goals and priorities that were passed by the voters in the state of Oregon a couple of years ago.
So we had a recent conversation. I did the League's lobbyist, Erin Doyle, one of her priorities is housing and homelessness. And we touched on this a little bit too. And as far as it also kind of came up in third-party building inspections, so that if you don't have a trained workforce who's trained to do the trades, realistically, you kind of are sort of hamstringing yourself a little bit within this. And so that's kind of what I'm hearing from you, right, that this is to get people trained up, which are very well-paying jobs, they're careers, that would certainly help to mitigate and perhaps manage this problem. You likened it to more of a chronic problem than a crisis?
Yeah, we have been in a chronic state as far as our workforce development for many years. We don't have enough carpenters. We don't have enough electricians. We don't have enough painters. We don't have the people that are necessary to make that economic engine go. And very often we see ourselves as either importing people into the state to fill those roles, or those roles are not being filled at all. And then we have problems and bottlenecks in construction and other areas that are in desperate need of people with those skill levels and expertise to fill those roles. And so we have to grow our own. And I note one anecdotal piece. I was talking to a friend of mine recently about what his needs are, and he's a housing developer, and he said he's lost workers because, one, there wasn't any place affordable for his worker to live.
Oh, wow.
And two, that, he was going to get paid more money by leaving the state and going somewhere else where he could get a higher paying job and that he could get a place for his family to live. And we cannot afford to lose those workers.
No,
we have to retain them.
We do. And, there's almost a mindset shift as well, where a lot of, even at the K-12 level, there'd been a track towards college. And you see a trending track back towards the trades as sort of the unintended consequences of those decisions are now being mapped out now when we're looking at these chronic issues that we have with housing and homelessness.
Well, one of the things that was short-sighted several years ago with a few school districts, I won't name any specifically, that divested themselves from career and technical education. So they took the shop classes out. And what we know in education is that 80% of the students that are coming through our pipeline are not going to go on to 4-year degrees. And, some of them are not going to go on to 2-year degrees. But what we do know is that 80% has skills that need to be developed that will put them in a pipeline to get jobs that are going to be sustainable and career-oriented jobs that they can, fit themselves into. We don't have enough of those students going through the pipeline, and we don't have the set of instructors and equipment and technology that we need to bolster that pipeline.
Well, just, learning about you and your background, you bring a wealth of knowledge to your role now as incoming president to really tackle these things head on. So when your year is over, when you look back on your year, what do you hope to see as a significant accomplishment for your tenure as league president?
There's only so much that you can do in a year. And one of the things that I want to do is be able to broaden the footprint of LOC for us to have a more prominent role in state government. I want us to be in a place where we are the go-to association for the governor and the legislature to talk about issues that are not just city-focused issues, but have a broader scope that, includes the cities and what cities' needs are, whether that be workforce development, furthering education, developing better strategies for relieving our housing chronic situation, developing transportation infrastructure. Those are things that I hope that we can move the needle forward and that we can build a stronger, more robust relationship with the Oregon legislature and the governor's office.
I'd like that. That's broad and it's optimistic, and I think it's certainly doable. And this is our first time meeting, so I know a little bit about you, having seen other talks that you've done, but I don't know much about you personally. So, and I don't know whether a lot of our listeners, the league, it tends to be policy focused and things like that. For those listening, what is something interesting about you, Greg Evans, that somebody would not, maybe looking at your curriculum vitae or your resume, would not know about you?
Well, when I was in college back in the early 1980s, I grew up in the city of Cleveland, born and raised there. And I was involved politically. My family was involved politically. My godfather was Carl Stokes, was the mayor of Cleveland from 1967 to 1971, the first African-American mayor of a major American city. But in 1982, I was involved in a gubernatorial campaign of a gentleman by the name of Jerry Springer.
That Jerry Springer?
That Jerry Springer. He was mayor of Cincinnati.
That's right, yes.
And he was running for governor of Ohio.
Okay.
And I worked for Jerry on the east side of Cleveland. Had the honor and opportunity to drive him around to campaign events. Jerry did not win the Democratic nomination for governor. He went back to Cincinnati, started a career in television as a news anchor, and then he moved to Chicago as a news anchor, continued his career there, and that's where he started the Jerry Springer Show. And I kind of think after that, that's all she wrote, you know.
That's what I think most people know him as. I was familiar that he had a political life before all that. Well, that's fascinating. That had to have been a fascinating time, especially as a younger man, first kind of dipping your toe into the political arena.
Yeah, it was. You know, I've been passing out literature and knocking on doors since I was a little boy with my mother. But you know, as I started maturing and getting older and getting into more campaigns and different roles, I started getting into, you know, beyond the licking of envelopes and putting on stamps and things and making phone calls. I got to have up close and personal interactions with people who were seeking political office. And that was really eye-opening and informative for me. And it kind of fueled my passion to continue my work both politically and in the community and trying to improve the lives, you know, of our constituents across, whether it was in Ohio or when I moved to Oregon, you know, 34 years ago.
Well, it definitely is a calling for many people. Servant leadership, wanting to serve your community, is commendable. It takes a lot of time. I'm pretty sure most of this is volunteer for you, so you're sacrificing time and treasure to do this. So it's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
And I'm delighted to meet you and to have you sit down for just a few minutes to share some of your background and your goals that you have for the upcoming year with our listeners. I hope I have you back again during the year as things come up so we can keep people informed. We're going to be going back over the legislative priorities to give people an update on where we're at on this. So I will certainly be ringing your phone and asking you to come back in.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, best of luck to you in the coming year. We will see you and hear from you again, like I said. So once again, we're talking to incoming League of Oregon Cities President Greg Evans. Mr. Evans, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Denise.
Thanks for listening to this episode of City Focus. My name is Denise Nanke, and I'm the host and producer of City Focus, the podcast from the League of Oregon Cities. The League is a governmental entity formed to work with our members to help local government better serve the citizens of Oregon. LOC strives to be the go-to place for Oregon cities as a resource hub for advocacy, education, and best practices. While our focus is Oregon and Oregon issues, we realize that we have many issues in common across the country, and we hope this podcast will reach beyond the borders of our state to share ideas and solutions. If you have suggestions for topics or comments about this or any of our podcasts, send me an email at cityfocus@orcities.org.